Good afternoon, and thank you again for joining us once again on ERPIC Live. Our discussion tonight focuses on Eastern Mediterranean energy. I have with me Dr. Klerkos Kyriagidis, head of our Law and Democracy program. Klerkos.
Evening.
And Mr. Gary Lakes, co-director of our energy program. Gary.
Yes.
As usual, I need to remind everyone that all participants express their personal views. Gary, we've had some news over the weekend that there's a deal that was closed between Turkey and Israel regarding the sale of gas. Is this about the Turkish-Israeli gas pipeline that we've been hearing for so many months?
No, that's it wasn't an agreement between Israel and Turkey. It was an agreement between the Leviathan partners and ERPIC. It's an Israeli company, and it was for the supply of gas to the Israeli domestic market. The reports you've seen that connecting Turkey with this were erroneous. ERPIC has as a partner the Turkish company Zorlu, and together they intend to build power generation stations in Israel. And so this Leviathan gas, and I think this is the first contract that's been agreed for the supply of Leviathan to Israel's domestic market. It'll be used, that gas will be used to supply those facilities. The agreement is for like 6 billion cubic meters over a period of 18 years, and the estimated value is estimated at $1.3 billion, I think. So that's what all that was about. It's not part of any of the relationship or reconciliation or whatever that's going on between Israel and Turkey.
However, there are some developments on the sale of Israeli gas to Turkey, aren't there?
Well, there may be. I don't think there's anything out in the open. The political relations between Israel and Turkey haven't really reached a point of normalcy yet, and so, I mean, there may be discussions between the companies. There's certainly been a lot of expressions of interest on both sides, I believe. But as far as any sort of agreement, I haven't seen any indication of that. Although there's always speculation and talk amongst those interested.
Is this though part of a developing conceptualization of what the regional energy industry is going to look like? There are competing models, I suppose, of the direction that the pipelines are going to take, the placement of the LNG facilities, if any, et cetera.
Yeah.
Is there a context where the idea of a Turkish hub competes with the idea of an Egyptian hub, let's say?
I don't think it's anywhere near that yet. You'd need a heck of a lot more gas than what's been discovered in the East Med for there to be several hubs. I think that the idea that's seems to be materialized, that the companies are working towards right now is there's in the region there's a demand for gas and for energy, and I think that the idea essentially is to use East Med gas to serve those regional markets, and so this will materialize, in terms as far as infrastructure as with pipelines to more pipelines like from Leviathan to Israel to serve that market. Also, perhaps onto Jordan. I've seen reports that there's a deal very close between Leviathan and Egypt, whereby there would be gas going to the BG plant, which is going to be Ididku, which is going to be turned over to Shell very shortly because Shell has purchased BG. Of course, everybody's interested in the prospect of a the possibility of Israeli gas going to Turkey. And it's sometimes on the periphery of that, there's even hints that the questions, could Aphrodite gas, Cypriot gas, wind up going through Turkey too? That just, there's no real clear indication of any of this yet because of the political circumstances that exist within the region.
But the planning for the Turkish corridor, lack of a better term, has been long in development. I mean, there's a number of years where several plans were being kicked around, where you would have a number of Middle Eastern pipelines ending up near Ceyhan, and they're finding their way onto Europe, and so on. So it's not a new thing, but obviously the new developments in the Eastern Med are new, and exactly they're perhaps affecting this. But how are they affecting it? Are they affecting it? You've got your finger on the pulse better than we do.
Well, I don't know. There's, the idea of Turkey being a hub for energy has been around for quite a long time. In the early 90s, there was, I remember writing a story about, Rotterdam on the Med, and that was in reference to Ceyhan, where regional oil and gas supplies would be directed towards Ceyhan, and from there they would be, go out to the markets. That idea has fallen away. I mean, of course, there's the BTC from Azerbaijan, which delivers crude oil, and there is, I think, Kurdish oil going now through Ceyhan as well. But as far as sending, if you're referring to the Turkish corridor as like the plan of sending a gas pipeline from Leviathan.
No, the general idea that it was going to be this, actually from Azerbaijan.
Well, the southern corridor, yes.
The southern corridor.
Yeah. Well, that's going to materialize. The contracts are signed.
But that was
construction
scaled
should
down
begin
at some point, and it's still going ahead, right?
Oh yes, it's going to it'll carry 10 billion cubic meters of gas initially. There are plans ultimately to bump that up. Of the gas coming from Azerbaijan, Turkey will take 6 BCM, and 10 will go on to Europe through the Trans-Adriatic pipeline. And I guess that when you hear mention of East Med gas going to Turkey, there's some. I guess people are thinking that East Med gas would hook up into this system and go on to Europe. But personally, I think that Turkey's situation is such is that any East Mediterranean gas, primarily from Israel, would stay in Turkey because the market there needs that. Yes, it's big, it's projected to grow, and also, there are complications now with Turkey and Russia, which was its largest gas supplier.
It's strange that Turkey itself has very few reserves. And in some ways, I think there was the other day you were commenting that you came across some material indicating that there was a...
Yes, it's a very interesting declassified CIA memorandum dated 16th of July 1974, which makes this very point. This is a day after the coup here in Nicosia. The CIA comments, "The Turks have long been frustrated by seeing valuable oil reserves discovered near their borders in lands formerly part of the Ottoman Empire, while Turkey itself has had only minor success in finding oil in commercial quantities within its own boundaries." So it's a bit,
this is way before the East Mediterranean discoveries. So I guess the feeling must run even deeper that Turkey is sort of cut off from these, or will it be? Well, it's not necessary that it will be.
Well, I mean, what we know for certain is that the Ottoman Empire came crashing down at the end of the First World War, at the time when the oil industry was bubbling to life, and the the territories that flaked away from the Ottoman Empire and fell initially into British and French hands and thereafter became independent are the ones that
did they
lead
just
the
fall into British and French hands?
well-
Or it was a little bit more calculated than
I mean, it is more complicated than that.
not complicated, but calculated.
And
Yeah.
the historical point that that's worth making is that the lands which used to be part of the Ottoman Empire ended up becoming
What's
major
the cause and
players
effect?
in the oil
Because
industry.
perhaps one can say that one of the reasons for the breakup of the Ottoman Empire was exactly that, the discovery and exploitation of huge resources.
And that must rankle with Turkey, as
Right.
the CIA acknowledged in July 1974.
Right.
Yeah, well, certainly now, but with, there was a period when the Turkish economy was doing much better than it is now, and demand was growing, and the Turks signed a lot of contracts with, especially with Russia, even Turkmenistan, which has yet to materialize. But it's just, it's the circumstance of geology.
Sure.
And it is a bit upsetting, I would imagine, if you're needing, you need this energy, and now you're sort of
What's
in a
your view of the
political
developing situation with Russia? I mean, between Russia and Turkey. The Russians, surprisingly, or perhaps not surprisingly, didn't cut off any energy supplies to Turkey. They wouldn't do that, would they?
No, but they've put up the price.
Oh, they have?
They put up the gas pump recently put up the price
Okay.
to the Turks. They've refused to give them the discount they usually do. But it's a curious development with Russia and Turkey, and how it seemed that Mr. Putin and Mr. Erdogan were very much on the same tack for quite some time, and then this incident with the jet fighter happens, and it immediately falls away. And you have to wonder, really what's behind it. Well, why has it been such a dramatic, falling out? So.
One would think that, in addition to all the other things that Turkey is taking into consideration, would push Turkey towards looking at East Mediterranean gas, in addition to looking at Iranian gas or oil and other things. It would perhaps be a little more keen to enter into contracts for the Eastern Med gas, or is it not enough? I mean, is the gas find still not sufficient? Everybody's talking about all this potential revenue and potential huge industry, but is it?
I think Turkey's recently tried to. It's having talks with Azerbaijan to secure more supplies in future. They want to get gas supplies from Iraqi Kurdistan, from the Kurdish regional government. At times they were talking about piping gas from Iran and piping gas from Qatar into eastern Turkey.
Now, with Iran coming back, is there that possibility, or Iran will export from where? What's the main export?
With Iranian gas?
Yeah.
I think they send about 10 billion cubic meters a year to Turkey. They send some to Armenia, maybe
Is there
a little
a pipeline?
to Azerbaijan.
Is there?
There are pipelines, but sometimes the Iranians fail to meet those supply targets, and because it's got its own domestic demands. And,
Sure.
And I imagine now with the sanctions having been lifted, that I think there's going to be
additional development.
A considerable amount of effort going into developing the gas resources for domestic
How large
use.
is Iran in comparison to Qatar? Let's say?
Well, Iran shares
the same reserve.
It shares the same reserve. Well, the Qataris call it the North Field, and the Iranians call it South Pars, and it's located in the Persian Gulf.
Yeah.
And so the maritime border runs through that, and they've split that. And there's there's certain it's in accordance with their maritime areas. There's plans. The Iranians have drawn up a huge development plan for South Pars, and now that the sanctions are removed, there'll be you assume that they'll be offering contracts. You know,
Yeah.
I've seen reports that they're very anxious to develop them and quickly. And one of the things that Iran wants to do is it's got 3 stalled LNG projects.
Yeah.
I think they total about 40 million tons a year. I mean, that's quite a lot of LNG
Sure.
to come on. If it works well, maybe, you know, in the early 2020s, it would be there. I mean, of course, the comments you see from the Iranians are a little more ambitious, but, you know, practical terms.
Have you come across
2020s.
any rumor plans or the talk of plans of pipelines coming through Syria to the Med?
I
mean,
think there
linking-
were, but all of
there
that
were-
stuff has,
is
you know,
put on hold
yeah,
at least. Yeah.
all of that stuff. I think that there was, you know, prior to 2011, you know, there were talk about oil pipelines to was it Banias or to one of the Syrian towns on the
Yeah.
Mediterranean. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
there's all kinds of ideas about how to ship and send oil and gas, but you know, I mean, not all of them materialize. Certainly not.
Perfect.
Yes, the reference to Syria had me thinking. Can I just make 2 points? This is
Sure.
just 2 generic interventions. Firstly, unfortunately, energy has formed the backdrop to at least 3 conflicts in the Eastern Mediterranean and Middle East that I can think of. One is the Suez Crisis of 1956. The second is the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s, and the third is the Iraqi invasion and occupation of Kuwait. And that should put us on notice that there may be a bonanza flowing from the energy deposits here in the Eastern Mediterranean, but the potential bonanza must be counterbalanced with the ever-present risk of conflict.
Well, if you want to include the American invasion of Iraq in 2003,
Of
if that was
course.
all about oil,
Exactly.
then of course that you've got that factor too. So, you know, it's
It should make us pause and think
Yeah.
carefully about how we deal with energy in this region. And the second point I wanted to make specifically does concern Syria. This is an exceptionally dangerous part of the world, and energy security requires an energy security strategy.
Yeah.
And any energy security strategy must dovetail with a national security strategy. So the Republic of Cyprus, in my view, must have coherent, effective, and transparent energy national security strategies and national security strategies, which everyone understands and contributes towards.
One thing, though, that sets the Eastern Mediterranean industry apart is that it's an offshore industry rather than a land-based. Okay, for some of the LNG facilities, etc., would be land-based, perhaps. But that kind of gives it a little bit of a different dynamic. Because how do you control the maritime areas? And I mean, you control them in a different way, obviously. So it's a different set of geopolitical or strategic considerations.
well, because it's offshore, defending those facilities is going to
It's different
be
than,
a big concern. I mean, you know, the Israelis have expressed this many times already, and I'm sure that the Cypriots have given it good thought as well.
But I mean, in the beginning, when Noble was first drilling, if you remember, Turkey was very annoyed, and it was present with its naval ships and so on. I mean, in view of the developments of the last couple of years, do you think that's dissipated, that's changed in any way, or is it just because there haven't been any other drillings?
I think that I don't think Turkey's position has changed much on that. I just think it's sort of it's actually rather convenient that the circumstances aren't conducive for drilling right now, that the talks are taking place at this time. You'd have to wonder how if there would be some sort of impact on the negotiations if drilling were underway.
You think Turkey wouldn't back down? It doesn't seem that it would. I mean, there's no evidence. Or is there?
I don't know. I don't know. It hasn't before, so it seems pretty adamant in its position regarding the East Med, and so I think a lot of. I don't think that's going to be resolved until the Cyprus issue is resolved as well.
Why is there no drilling? Was it, I mean, in view especially of the new Zohr discovery, you would expect that everybody would be rushing. Are they rushing?
Well, no, my understanding, it's rekindled the interest of companies, the Zohr discovery. Now, mind you,
certainly less than what it was supposed to be, right?
Gary, can you just tell us where the Zohr discoveries are?
Okay, the Zohr discovery is only from I think about 6 kilometers
from Cyprus, from the Cyprus EEZ,
from Block 11,
right,
which has been awarded to Total,
and which Total wanted to leave. Wanted to abandon it before Zohr, and then it came back, right?
Well, it didn't come back, and it didn't abandon. It
abandoned
relinquished Block 10,
okay,
which was awarded in February 2013, and the Cypriot government persuaded Total to continue to look at things, and it was sort of touch and go. I don't think there was a great deal of enthusiasm until the Zohr discovery, and now Total's announced that it's planning to drill next September.
Right.
All right, or unless it's made
talking about
known.
Looking at a new model or something.
Well,
that's
it's
oil talk for something.
What's my understanding? All the discoveries, the gas discoveries that have taken place offshore in the East Med so far have been in sandstone.
Huh.
And the Zohr discovery was made in carbonite buildup. So the geology is different. And I think that it's ENI that made that discovery, all right? So I think this may have something to do with ENI's explanation. Has it been a year and a half now? When did they leave? It was late 2014. When they had it pulled out of Block 9, they had a drilling plan for 4 wells. They drilled 2 dry holes and said we want to recalibrate our seismic. So it could be that's what's happened. They've used a different economic model on Zohr. I mean, I don't know for sure, and they've come up with this discovery. Now, mind you, they initially announced 30 trillion cubic feet. They've since said it's about 16. But it's encouraging when you think that ENI will return to Cypriot waters and, perhaps using this model and try again and actually find something. So that's one thing to maybe look forward to is regarding the Cypriot offshore. I mean, the point to make here is on the Cyprus offshore. And I get the impression at times that people become, you see it in the press and certainly in comments on some of the stories, that people are really rather cynical about Cyprus and its gas potential. But there's only been 4 wells drilled here, and there was the Aphrodite discovery well and the appraisal well in Aphrodite, and then the 2 dry holes in Block 9. And I mean, there've been, I've attended conferences here in Cyprus where representatives from Norway have said, well, listen, we drilled 50 wells or more.
Right, to put it in perspective, even Israel had drilled, I don't know how many wells.
Well, they were giving these, that led to some of the, confusion there in Israel, a couple of years back, where they were just basically giving the licenses away.
So what's the timeline now for ENI and Total? What's the expected?
Well, I understand.
I mean, we hear all sorts of things, but I mean, presumably you've got a better sense.
I think I understand that Total wants to drill in September. They're preparing to try to meet that target. Now, to do that, I mean, but that's contingent on them having the facility here in Larnaca to an operations base. If they don't have a base to operate from, then this will push drilling back till...
What is the municipality's objection? I mean, one would think that any municipality would be jumping at the
which
chance...
municipality? Larnaca.
Jumping at the chance of becoming the new Aberdeen of, I don't know.
Yeah,
of
well,
these
it's
things.
supposed to be state-of-the-art facilities. I haven't visited them,
Yeah.
but they're supposed to be very, very nice facilities there. And
People don't want them. Why?
well, I
Because
guess there seems to be a tourism project that
oh, the competing. Yes.
yeah,
Okay. Well,
that
that's
that
sure.
that
Okay. May
might go in
explain.
that spot.
May
But
explain
frankly,
a lot. Yeah.
I mean, it's Cyprus is really
Right.
it's got to provide a facility like this. I mean, it's got to get serious about developing its hydrocarbon industry because
This reinforces my point of earlier. There needs to be an energy security strategy,
Sure.
and it needs to be sketched out and drafted and published so everyone can.
But you know, you can't
meet-
get away from the population's response, because in Israel, for example, for many years there was the environmental issue, that they couldn't find the appropriate spot on the coast for facilities. After that, they did at some certain parts. They've
I think
identified.
that's going to remain an
But it's
issue
going to remain
in
an
Israel,
issue.
yeah.
In Cyprus, it was originally felt that it was there was none of this public reaction, but it's proven wrong, and I think a number of companies may come to regret, their decision to move to Cyprus.
No, well,
you
let's
think
hope it
that's
not
too-
comes to that. But to develop these there's got to be an operations base. I mean,
Sure.
Cyprus is a good place to have an
Sure.
operations base, even
Provided
perhaps,
you get one, though.
yeah, right, yeah. But see, I mean, the Cyprus government's really got to get.
Could you see it developing in the north if that's, or is it still politically a hot
You mean
potato?
without a settlement?
Yeah.
I don't know. No, I don't see anything
No.
could happen there without a settlement.
Yeah.
You can't operate legally.
Sure.
So
Sure.
that's the situation with that.
What are the plans for Aphrodite, really, at the moment?
About a week ago, BG finalized its farm in to
That's right.
Block 12. All right, it's
35%
taking
from Noble.
35% from Noble. I think it paid only 165 million for that.
It was a good price, it seems.
It seems
Now,
like it.
Why was Noble in such a hurry to sell?
Well, I don't know if they were in a hurry or not. I think they're looking for a partner, and I think the fact that
Is that a low price? Is that a good price for
Like-
Noble? Or you
I don't.
can't-
It seems it's the price they
That's the
settled
price
for.
they sell, sure.
But I mean, I can't understand why BG would buy into Block 12 if they didn't have some intention of actually using the resource. And of course, BG operates the LNG
IDCU.
plant at IDCU. BG will of course be taken over by
Shell.
Shell, but it seems that from what some reports I've seen say that Shell intends to make use of that facility, and that Leviathan gas is there to use, and hopefully Cypriot gas as well. Block 12's waiting on a commercial agreement, and we don't know if that's going to be for the LNG plant, for Egyptian domestic use, and the government has seen the development plan.
Yeah.
And so Noble's delivered a development plan to the Israeli government as well for Leviathan. So, I mean, a lot. It doesn't seem like there's a great deal happening right now. It's not like
there's also talk about an interim solution or interim plan that the Cypriots were looking at.
yeah.
But I'm not sure that's going ahead either because of the low oil prices. And
Yeah.
the rest.
Well, I mean, yeah.
This Clercos was to bridge the gap between the time when Aphrodite was actually going to come online, and which it's anybody's guess. how
Again,
long
yeah.
it's
I
gonna take.
mean, it's things that you haven't heard much about this
Yeah.
for quite some time. I mean, they
Right.
meet and discuss things, but I don't see. I just don't know the status of that. It seems as if. And they don't divulge anything because they cite confidentiality agreements. But with the price of oil low now, it doesn't seem that
But it puts
electricity should be
everything
so
on
difficult
hold,
to.
doesn't it? At the end of the day,
What,
I mean,
put What does?
these low prices. I mean, perhaps the only thing that's a potential is this underwater electrical power line. You saw that. That was part of what was signed, the agreement that was signed when Mr. Netanyahu visited Cyprus. There's apparently the plan to connect Israel to Cyprus to Greece with an electrical power line.
Right.
Which I guess would be operated by gas turbines. I mean, the electricity would be generated by gas at some point.
Yeah.
And you could make better use of transport of energy that way. Isn't that cheaper?
Well, that's the theory.
At the end, rather than piping the gas, you connect the sockets.
Yeah, I haven't seen the actual estimate on the cost of that, and I don't.
But it's got to be cheaper than dropping a pipeline, right?
You mean like in reference to the East Med gas pipeline?
Right.
Yes, I
Right.
think so. I think that's.
I mean, for connecting
That's
A to
something-
B, any A to B, isn't it cheaper to drop a cable than a pipeline?
Well, I don't know the exact cost, but I would think it would be. But also, I mean, that project. It's.
I mean, it sounds naive, but it's
It's the Euro-Asia interconnector, and that's been that's been again an idea that's been around for quite a few years now.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It seems as if they're actually surveying the seabed, to see if they can plan a route
Right.
for that. So and it's on the EU list of
A priority.
priorities. Yes. So priorities of common interest, and
Right.
so we'll see. I mean, it seems like there's quite a lull right now with all of these projects, but by 2017, a lot of things could begin to happen.
Yeah.
And we won't know until they do, because the authorities are pretty guarded about what they're saying, and also the companies are very guarded too. I mean, they don't want to jinx their.
I mean, the new player, the new kid on the block are the Russians. I mean, they've taken some concessions in Syria, and I mean,
but
are they the new kid or the old kid who's come back?
I don't know if a kid applies in either one. But
To Gazprom, it's a big kid.
No, but well, yeah. I mean, I think you can sort of tune Syria out for quite some time.
Yeah.
What'd be interesting is if Lebanon could get itself together and actually finish that licensing round.
Yeah.
That was launched in February 2013.
But I heard some comments that to the effect that regarding Turkey and the southern corridor, there were certainly some understanding at some level between Shell and Gazprom. There had to be. Because Shell was involved in a big way in Turkey with DPAO and all the rest of it, and then Gazprom was supplying a lot of the gas to Turkey and so on. So there had to be some, at least basic understanding, and not a conflictual situation, or to avoid any.
Well, I don't know of anything.
No,
like
I mean,
in
your sense that
particular.
you've known this business, you've been reporting on this business for 30 years.
Bit, yes.
So if anybody can sense things, it would be you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, right. Shell's been active in Turkey in exploration.
Right.
I don't know if Gazprom's been active in exploration in Turkey. They're basically
Not the exploration. I mean the marketing and the transport and all of that stuff.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
Turkey
sure.
gets 60% of its gas supplies from Gazprom, right?
Right.
But
So there had to be the person who suggested it, and I don't need to say
you
who.
mean there's some sort of
That there was
conspiracy.
that a tacit sort of understanding,
Gentleman's agreement.
Gentleman's agreement.
Yeah.
Because these huge companies, they don't want to get in tangle on each other's hair.
Yeah. Well, it wouldn't be surprising, no.
Yeah.
But
and I mean the extrapolation of that is that these huge companies do have geopolitical views and strategies and so on, which affect direction that events take.
Yes. Yes.
You know, in
Well, you know, Iran's an example
in
of
a
that,
deep
isn't it? So,
sort of way. You know, in a,
yeah, and also the Iraq thing, if oil was the motivating factor there. So.
yeah.
Yes, certainly, yes.
I mean, the conclusion I draw from this discussion is that Cyprus is muddling through, which is a habit
and in
they
deeper waters that it can that it
You're
knows.
saying it overattends, is that what you're saying?
it's one of the things that the British left here in Cyprus. The legacy of imperialism is the British concept of muddling through, because there doesn't seem to be any, correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, but there doesn't seem to be any coordination or strategic planning. It all seems to be...
And this brings one to the theme that we've been getting in a number of our discussions, is, you know, you need a proper settlement, therefore, you know, between the parties on Cyprus to avoid deadlock in these things, and you know, be able to work out some of the details and some of the planning and so on. You need a positive sort of attitude. And that's a key element.
Well,
and,
I mean, this isn't a discussion about the settlement, but I asked the question, is the proposed bi-communal, bi-zonal federation the appropriate model for procuring a coherent energy security strategy or a coherent national security strategy?
Some people say that it's better because it'll, you know, it involves, I think it all comes down to, you know, if the goodwill is there, and it's, you know, the positive attitude of everybody is there, you can get a positive result. If some people have hidden agendas and other things, the more complicated a structure is, the more some of these things come to the surface and create problems. So it's really an attitudinal kind of approach, if you will. So, you know, but certainly the more complicated a government structure is, you know, it's more prone to corruption. We've been through this many times. It's, you know, all the various interests are finding their way through and expressing themselves and so on.
Well, there's another dimension.
There's two sides to the argument.
There's another dimension that must be mentioned here. Again, if we take the Annan Plan as our precedent, that envisaged the, inverted commas, demilitarization of a post-settlement Cyprus. And if demilitarization, in inverted commas, is on the cards now in a post-settlement scenario, then how is the Republic of Cyprus or its successor going to protect its energy infrastructure? I mean, these questions really should be the matter of public discussion and debate.
It's all in the definitions, though, because it's what they mean by military. You know, what military are you going to get rid of? Does that include the Coast Guard? Does that include the special police forces? Does that include, you know, and I think they're probably, and you know, we have no way of knowing since everything is behind closed doors, but one would expect that they are discussing some of these things. One would hope that they're discussing these things.
I mean, just can I ask Gary a question? Sort of in generally speaking, how are energy infrastructures generally protected, and to what extent is there a cooperation between the state and the private sector, particularly the energy industry in particular?
I guess it would depend on, you know, the circumstances of the country that they're operating out of. I mean, you know, in the Gulf, I would imagine there would be, you know, the patrol boats and the rest of that. Here, in the East Med, I don't see how you could possibly demilitarize, considering the situation in the area as it is. It would, you know, you would have to you rely on someone else to protect you, and it's not practical. And I don't think certainly the Israelis aren't going to, you know, favor anything like that. And if they've got an interest in, you know, this area, you know, even to include Block 12, you know, it's going to be a problem as things develop. As right now, there's the rig out there for Leviathan and Tamar, and And there's nothing out there in Block 12 as far as I know.
Mm.
And so, you know, we just, as things begin to develop, we'll see.
But there's some plan of once these really develop Leviathan, they've got to put some facilities there, right? There's sort of at the very least the pumping and storage facilities.
Right, the idea is to
and so on.
Yeah,
If not an FLNG,
no, it won't
floating
be,
LNG.
it won't be LNG. No, it'll be, I think, floating storage and production platform of some pipe, and from there, you know, they will run the pipelines to shore, depending on which direction they go. So, you know.
We're less than 200 miles from the carnage in Syria.
Yeah, right.
And that's what people really have to wake up to, that this is an exceptionally dangerous part of the world.
Some of the danger is that if some of these, either ISIS or anybody else gets to the coast and they develop a sort of a coastal attack facility, then there's a major problem.
Well, I'm thinking here of there was the terrorist attack in Algeria, if I remember correctly, a year or two ago, on the energy infrastructure there, and that highlights that you need not only offshore energy defence, but you need an onshore mechanism in place as well. So these are subjects that really ought to be at the forefront of people's concern here in Cyprus.
Yeah, well, we'll see how this develops. I think, Cyprus is going to need its Coast Guard, and who the members of that are going to be. We would imagine Cypriot citizens would be, involved in that, and hopefully that's how it turns out. I mean, should take care of its own, defense, but certainly as a small place, it will need the help of others.
I mean, I would suggest that before a settlement, they should come up with an energy security strategy and a national security strategy, because if they can't work it out before a settlement, they're going to be able to grid after it. And that should be as part, that should be part of the settlement put forward to the population, the citizens, in any referendum, so that they know what is on the cards. Otherwise, everybody will be walking into a cloud of darkness. If there's such a thing as a cloud of darkness.
Well, there's certainly clouds of...
I think it's a possibility.
Or dark clouds.
Dark clouds, that's it.
But, I mean, overall, you would see sort of a positive future development economically and so on in the Eastern Med. I mean, there's suggestion that the pieces could be there, that there could be cooperation between Cyprus and Israel and Egypt and whatever, or is that too outlandish?
No, I think it's very possible. There's the all right. What, a week ago we had Netanyahu and Tsipras and Anastasiades meeting here in Nicosia. That was the first of that. What do you call that? The trilateral meeting. But Egypt, Cyprus,
there's another trilateral
Greece,
with Egypt and another one with Jordan.
They've had
Jordan, Cyprus, and Greece.
Apparently,
it's in the works.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, I mean, the idea is to, it'd be great to see a meeting here in Nicosia of Egypt, Israel, Greece, and Cyprus. If there are eventually energy deals between Israel and Egypt, Cyprus and Egypt.
And Turkey, presumably, eventually.
Yeah, well,
It has to be a democratic Turkey, I emphasize.
No preconditions.
Right.
Or, I don't know, is being democratic a precondition of economic cooperation?
Well, Egypt is not fully democratic, we have to admit.
So, but no, I think there's a chance for some good times ahead, and economic development and some real positive developments. But there's a number of hurdles to get through, all the regulatory issues,
what's happening in Israel with that?
They seem to have. I think they've made peace to it to some extent. I don't think if it's entirely resolved. I think we'll learn more in time. I think the government, Netanyahu's government, has promised that they want to push the development of the
But
gas fields
now
through.
it's in Supreme Court, I think, right?
I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't
Yeah,
know. I
yeah.
don't know
I
that.
think there was some sort of a development.
But yeah, well, I don't know. There's a lot of. It seems like there's a lot of issues there that either different interests bring up, and so it's just getting through that, getting through all that stuff. But it does seem that they're going to have to make some decisions. I mean, Noble is, I understand, keen to move on with that. They've got letters of intent signed, not just with IDCU, but also with the Damietta LNG plant. There's a private Egyptian firm called Dolphinus Holdings that want to import Israeli gas. There's the prospect of selling it to Jordan State Electricity Company.
Yeah.
So it's in their interest to get all that sorted out and to start selling gas and making some money from it,
Yeah.
I mean, the other day I was reading through some of the declassified emails of Hillary Clinton during her tenure as Secretary of State. They've been released, or some of them have been released on the website of the State Department. Everybody should try and read some of them because they make very interesting reading. But I caught one email. These are all declassified, so I'm not spilling any secrets here. One of those declassified emails spoke of the possibility of a free trade area springing up in the Eastern Mediterranean, which would encompass Greece, Turkey, Cyprus, and Israel. These were the ideas, it seems, that were swirling around the State Department or Washington in 2011. Is there any mileage in that proposal from the standpoint of today?
I don't know, but what has to happen? A peace has to break out in the East Med.
Well, since 2011, nothing but wars broken out in the Eastern Mediterranean, with Syria in particular.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the circumstance that needs to.
Again, as a journalist, you've been at it for so long. Is it on an upturn or is it on a downturn? I mean, this long haul.
That's a trick question, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, no. I mean, you've presumably traced this before?
Well, long time. You'd look at the things that are going on in the Middle East, and you'd say, "Wow, this just one of these days, this is just going to blow up." But you never really imagined how it would, but it looks like it's
blown up.
And there's some people say it's going to get worse before it gets worse. So there really is a chance of that it could get really very bad. I think that there's a lot of if you're talking about Turkey, there is the situation with the Kurds is serious, and the problems in the cities of southeast Turkey now. Some of them are almost under siege. It's such a complicated, interwoven a tangle of alliances and enemies in the region. It's the Kurds who are making advances against ISIS, yet Turkey's opposed to including the Kurds at the Syrian negotiations. You've got all these different interests. It's like you remember how Lebanon was during the Civil War. It's like that, only on a really big scale. And who knows how they're ultimately would deal with ISIS.
Is Turkey, as it being alleged by some, assisting ISIS in relation to the distribution of oil or gas?
I don't. It's been alleged. That's all I can say at this point. So,
but certainly again, can you trust the footage that's being thrown on the media of all those tankers waiting to cross into Turkey? I mean, that could be anywhere.
Yeah. But if reputable news agency is going to broadcast them, you'd think that they would check that out.
Yeah.
So, but it does seem that there's the U.S. coalition. I guess now the Brits and the French are involved in that now, aren't they? they're sort of ratcheting things up a bit and going after tankers and the facilities. The other day, I think the Syrians sent a letter to the UN accusing the U.S. coalition of actually hitting, infrastructure that was pretty vital to the oil industry there. So,
Are you talking about the coalition against ISIL? It's 63 states belong to that, and we mustn't forget the Republic of Cyprus is listed among the 63.
That's right. That's true.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, so I was looking for a positive note to end.
Yeah. Well, I think that
Is there something in the sort of the horizon that's
well,
promised?
I think if we can get companies drilling here,
But
if we can
certainly
move on with the drilling,
the price of oil being so low is doesn't really
well,
help in
for
that
example,
direction,
okay,
right?
all right, yeah, Noble's cut back on the amount of money it wants to put in investment. Yet, I think the fact that there's a regional market here it makes it its interest to develop that market, especially if it's got this large resource. That Egypt's desperate for gas, and so it's going to be working to develop its own resources and hopefully buy those from Israel and Cyprus.
Is oil and gas still going to be interchangeable for
I don't know. I think
always,
that the whole market price thing is in flux, and I think they're working out. It's going to evolve. That it will evolve in time. So because I think oil prices are going to stay reasonably low for a while, and because
Iran's coming online.
yes, and they plan to produce quite a lot. Iraq wants to up its production. If Libya should ever come to its senses, they had a capacity of 1.6 million a day. They're down to about 300,000 maybe.
Wow.
So, Syria was producing about 380,000 BD before the war began. There's a lot of wars. I mean, the wars in Sudan have stopped oil production there practically. I mean,
So from
politics.
From an oil business point of view, you won a bunch of wars, or
we don't know. See, I mean, the
oh, do you?
well, no,
it's being too cynical, perhaps.
But see, the thing is Saudi Arabia is producing more than 10 million a day, and so it wants market share. But I don't know if you hear that this strategy is supposedly working, but I don't really know if I understand this strategy. I mean, what is the point of this? Is it's to drive, producers with high costs out of the market, but so, I mean, that essentially was directed towards American shale producers, but you can drive them out for now, but they can come back as soon as the price, goes back up a bit. When it gets to that point where it's profitable to produce, then they're back on. So then you've got more oil coming on the market. And so what is that going to do? Is that going to cause the price to go down again? And so I think you could imagine to see, if you're looking at an oil chart of the future, I wouldn't be surprised if you see this sort of rolling this rolling line across the, the price scale.
Right.
So, we'll see. I mean,
what the conflict in Syria has really underlined is that this part of the world, the Eastern Mediterranean, is in the eye of so many great powers or major powers. You've got the British, the French, the Americans, the Russians. The Chinese are hovering in the background as well. And Cyprus is, I emphasize this again, less than 200 miles from Syria. And it's inevitably going to be affected by developments over there. And that's something that all of us need to be on our guard for.
Yeah, right. And it's also, why you need a security system here, definitely.
So we'll end on the note that we're the Times Square of the Eastern Med. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.